All right. Welcome, folks. We are here with the Goodness Podcast presented by the Wellness Movement for All. Very happy to be here with our first guest of this new podcast, Meredith Mortensen. Welcome, Meredith.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, yeah, you're the inaugural first episode. I previously had the Get After It PDX podcast, which was a very fun venture with lots of great guests. And that's been on hiatus for some years, and now we're bringing a podcast back that is similar but different with many, many more awesome guests like you.
Cool.
So, very excited. We just did an event this past weekend together at your place in Southeast Portland, Cookshop.
Yep, at Cookshop.
So that was obviously one thing to talk about, not the event specifically, although that was great, but what Cookshop is. We'll get to that. So that's a wonderful thing, business you have here. So we're going to talk about lots of topics. This podcast, I will just say as an overview, is, touching on lots of different things. We're trying to highlight people like you who are following their passions and doing interesting things, creating cool businesses that provide community and connection and allowing people to engage in their life and with food and lots of really important things. And we know movement has been part of your life, and obviously we like to talk about movement and wellness and mental health, so we're going to try to talk about a lot of things in a relatively short time, so we'll see how far we get. And of course, if we need to have you back for another episode, of course we can always do that. So we're going to throw it back. I like to go back and sort of see the evolution. So when you were a kid, I know pretty early you got into food, and we can talk about that. But from your earliest memory of wanting to be something when you grew up, what was your first memory of that? What was your first answer you would tell people?
I don't really remember having that thought as a little kid, but I want to say sometime around middle school, early high school years, I heard about the profession of being a physical therapist. And I was really into sports. And so I also loved skiing. And I saw that as potentially a way to have a job that would allow me to live in a place where I could ski all the time. And I really liked science class too, so it seemed like a good fit. But did not pursue that. But that was something that I thought would be a fun job.
Cool. Well, that's a great segue right away into movement. So clearly, from an early age, movement was... obviously most kids hopefully are moving around, but
Right.
You skied from an early age?
I skied from an early age. My family moved around quite a bit when I was really young and born outside Philadelphia, but we moved to Denver, Colorado when I was in kindergarten. And we lived there for just 18 months, but long enough to kind of catch that bug for skiing. And then several years later, we moved back to the East Coast and then to Minnesota. And Minnesota is not exactly known for amazing skiing, but there are quite a few very small ski hills, like close in to the city. So you can be on a small bump of a hill in like 20 minutes from where I grew up.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And so obviously that informed you wanting to be a physical therapist. Were there other forms of movement you enjoyed in your early years besides skiing?
Yeah, like I said, I played a lot of sports, and some of that was because I was a really shy kid. And when we moved to Minnesota, I was in third grade, and my dad moved first for his job. And when he got there, he just signed me up for a bunch of things, and I didn't really have a choice. But when I got there, I was like on a softball team, I played soccer, and I was on a swim team. Tennis lessons probably as well, which was the only thing that I really stuck with of those things. But he thought it would help me make friends, I think, or give me something to do. And so I was constantly playing sports. Yeah.
How did it do with the friends?
It didn't work so well, just shockingly. Being thrown into a pool. Swimming is probably not the best way to make kids when you're little because you're just like in the pool swimming. It's not a team sport exactly. But I didn't enjoy it that much as a kid, but then I went back to it as an adult several years ago and was like, oh, swimming's pretty great. I'm glad I learned how to do all the strokes when I was a kid.
So it's interesting. It makes me think clearly, a lot of people's experience around movement is maybe adult and or as a kid, is that it's actually a great way, of course, to connect with people and make friends, meet people. So, of course, that idea of your father's was a natural
I think
thought to
and
do
it did
that.
work. It just took a little while. I think it
wasn't
came
as
to me
quick
deciding what sports to
fix.
keep going with.
Okay.
And once I kind of found my niche and found the sports and the activities that I liked, and then I made wonderful friends through it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, also from a pretty early age, you got into food and cooking,
Well, with a
baking.
slight caveat, I was a super, super picky eater as a kid.
Yes.
So food meaning desserts. Like I was real into chocolate and sweet things. And if I learned how to make them, I could eat them more. So it was all about baking, learning about chocolate, buying little molds to like make chocolates for my friends, stuff like that.
Cool. How to put it? What was it? Just that you liked sugar? I mean, that's not
I
like
mean, kind of.
a
I was
passing
a
off.
picky eater until the very end of high school, early college. But I loved playing in the kitchen with the baking side of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so I would think the initial thing that affected you was the taste, right, of these things. Baking wasn't the first piece. The
For sure.
experience of eating these decadent, wonderful, amazing feeling things
Right. And they
is
weren't
the first
necessarily like
impact.
super fancy things. Like I still to this day say my favorite dessert is chocolate pudding.
Mm-hmm.
It's just super comforting. It's really easy. And I would like when I was real little, I would just make like Jello instant pudding, but I would do it start to finish and make it whenever I wanted to because I had my own little like child size mixer to make it in. And then kind of expanded to like cakes and cookies. And I started making like bûche de Noël, which is like the chocolate Yule log with little garnishes and things in high school and would make one of those every year. And yeah.
It's worth noting, in high school, you were named the most likely to replace Julia Child.
That was in a high school newspaper, which I think they tried to come up with like as many categories as possible, so as many kids as possible could get some sort of a like notation in the newspaper. But that was my accolade.
Pretty
I
good
had
one.
dinner parties occasionally for friends, so I think that's how
Amazing.
people
Wow.
knew of my getting into cooking.
So you would think that, potentially your parents were into cooking or baking. Were they influential in that way, or was this
Not so
something that
much. I
came out of
mean,
your
my mom,
desires?
grew up in the 80s. My mom cooked very well balanced meals and she was a good cook, but it was kind of a lot of like Midwestern same food all the time. She wasn't super adventurous, I guess. But
So is this a way to sort of
yeah,
break out of the mold and be a little bit
maybe.
extravagant with these rich,
Possibly,
delicious
yeah. And my
treats?
grandmother baked a lot, not necessarily things beyond like, I mean, probably cookies and pies, and she baked a lot of bread. So yeah, it probably comes from that as well.
Were your parents supportive of your love for baking? And
They were. I never considered I didn't really know that it was a job that I could pursue. I worked part-time in high school for it was like a catering company and a gourmet food shop and deli. And the chef at this place was kind of crazy. And that was my experience with someone in the food world. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be like that guy. So that was not something that I considered as a career to pursue.
at what point did it cross your mind that this could be a career path for you?
I mean, after, going to college and studying something totally different and being out in the working world for a few years and realizing I still really like baking. And I started post college making a couple of like cakes and desserts for friends when they had like, their niece's first birthday. I made a cake for a friend of mine, and someone else was having a dinner and was wondering if I would just make some desserts for it. And sort of started reevaluating, do I really want to keep doing this job that I've been doing for a few years, or do I want to maybe try cooking, maybe try going to culinary school? So it took a little while to get there.
And during the college years when you were not directly considering this as a career, were you still baking?
No,
So this was basically that passion was on a hiatus.
for sure. Yeah. I mean, living in, a college dorm, you don't really have the opportunity to bake much. And then when I did live with some friends in a house, like one year we all stayed on campus and had Thanksgiving together. And I don't specifically remember what I made, but we all like cooked all day long and might have baked something, but that's probably about it.
Okay. So I think a lot about identity and how much people, really develop an identity or something that they base their identity off, and how deeply people can get attached to those things, which is just an interesting topic in general. Which, of course, attaching your identity too strongly to one thing can, of course, be dangerous, because if somehow that changes or you can't do that thing for whatever reason, then you might have an identity crisis. So it sounds to me like cooking, baking, being the replacement for Julia Child in high school was a big part of your life, or big-ish.
It was a big hobby, I'd say. Yeah.
Was there any, I'm not trying to be overly dramatic or anything, but was there any, did it just sort of naturally get left by the wayside when you went to college, or was there
think
like
so. Yeah, it was not me like turning away from the kitchen or anything like that. It was just other things filled my time, and
So it was a natural, just
yeah.
growing.
But I think, it was still back there somewhere.
Clearly, of course it was. So tell me about that point of it sort of coming back into your life. And
Yeah, so like I said, I was studied economics and political science in college, ended up working for this entrepreneurial consulting education company in Chicago, and was starting to do some baking and cooking on the side, and was considering culinary school, but I wasn't totally sure if that's really what I should do. And then a friend and I were trying to plan a vacation, and we were looking at going to Mexico, and I found a resort that looked really amazing that had just opened. And when I went onto their website, instead of like booking something, I found a section that said now hiring, and decided to apply to work at a resort in Mexico, just north of Puerto Vallarta. Kind of flubbed my way and faked my way through saying that I was taking intensive Spanish classes. The owners,
fake it till you make it.
yeah, the owners were from LA, and so I like went and met with them, and they hired me to be kind of a, Jill of all trades, sort of. I was going to be the person that filled in for all of the other staff on their day off, because they were hiring some people from the U.S. and some people from France to come and work the next season, as well as a bunch of local folks from the village in Mexico. And I was planning on giving my notice on November 2nd was the day that I was going to give my notice, which was, I'm forgetting the dates exactly, but essentially I was planning on quitting my job and letting them know that I was leaving to move to Mexico. And the day before I was planning on quitting was 9/11.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, shoot, do I really quit my job and move and be in the tourism industry when some people around me all said, like, do not move, do not take this job. No one is going to travel ever again. No one is ever going to get on an airplane again. And I was like, no, I need to do this. And my thinking was like, I'm going to take a year and go live in Mexico and then decide, do I just want to come back and keep doing what I was doing, or do I want to go to culinary school?
Okay, gotcha.
So that was my plan. And anyway, still quit my job and still moved to Mexico. And it was a little unclear for a little while if the resort was going to make a go of it, because they had only been open for a year and it was, a new place and they had gotten a lot of accolades. But if people aren't going to travel, it's kind of hard to run a hotel that mostly caters to U.S. tourists. And half of the staff decided to not come. So we were short-staffed and everyone kind of moved positions around. But I was there for like 10, 11 months, not quite a full year, because they closed for a bit in the rainy season in the summer. But While I was there, our chef was this amazing woman who was from Boston and had not gone to culinary school. So her advice to me was do not waste your money.
Okay.
Do not go to culinary school. Just get a job in a kitchen somewhere like she did. But the way my brain works and the way I feel confident is really knowing something really well. And so it's like, I think if I want to do this, I really want to go to culinary school. So while I was there, I applied to go to culinary school and then did that right afterwards.
Great. So clearly that was a very pivotal decision,
Yes.
despite what people were telling you and the prevailing wisdom, so to speak, at the time. So I think this is a good thing to pause and focus on for a second, because that's sort of a theme, a general topic that I'm very interested in and like to celebrate, which is, part of what this whole podcast is about, is like people trying things, taking chances, going out on a limb, following a passion. So it's clearly very important to do. It's a lot of people have trouble doing it, clearly. It's scary, it's daunting, it's uncertain, of course. But that is the definition of adventure, is a thrilling endeavor with an uncertain outcome. So that, it essentially changed your whole life.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'll just fast forward now. You're a parent. You have 2 daughters, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What, if the topic came up with speaking to them about the importance of taking chances, hopefully chances you've somewhat calculated a little bit maybe, but do you feel that is integral to a engaged life, or how would you talk about taking chances with your daughters?
Yeah, I think taking chances, expanding moving beyond your comfort zone and trying things that might be a little scary are super important, I think. Whether it's like, trying out for a team where you don't know people, in sports for my kids, or hopefully they'll have a little bit of a travel bug or like the interest of like moving to a new place. I see ups and downs, pros and cons for, having led a rather nomadic life for almost a decade when I was in my 20s, which maybe I missed out on really forming strong roots in those days, or like being able to still feel super connected to people from my childhood. Like that's something that I don't really have so much. But I also know people kind of all over the world now, which I think is really amazing. And I would love it if my girls had that kind of an experience.
Yeah. And clearly, like I said, our general culture, it's sort of interesting, right? It's like in some ways we have this American pull yourself up by your bootstraps romantic notion of entrepreneurship and all this stuff. And yet, in so many ways, our culture, right, we're getting mixed messages. Part of the culture is saying, go for it, do all these things, go out on a limb, try new things. But then most people are not doing that. And a lot of our culture is, in the end, doesn't truly celebrate the risk takers. Like there's ways we romanticize it, but then there's other ways where the moment somebody doesn't succeed, we point fingers and say, "Oh, look, they're the risk takers." So yeah, it's just an interesting topic. So I think what I have come through pondering all these topics to think that I celebrate most, because I'm trying to create a culture, partially with this business as well, of there's no better or worse. All things are equal. So like walking 1,000 miles versus walking 100 miles versus 1 mile versus 1 block. Inherently, there's no better or worse. These are just different things. And everyone's different. Everyone's on their own journey. So if we're celebrating everything equally, then what actually is the common denominator that we're celebrating? And upon thinking about it more, I was like, the thing we're truly celebrating in its most simplified form is deliberate action. So that means you deciding to take this job in Mexico and move and take on this big adventure. That could be deliberate action to decide to stay and do the opposite. I mean, right? It's like we never know what the outcomes of our actions are going to be, but the point is to do something, to try something, to take a step. Just because I think we all know how easy it can be to sort of stagnate or feel stuck, or be doing a job for years upon years that we really don't don't in the end love, or isn't really serving us. So yeah, so I think that's deliberate action is the thing to celebrate.
And I mean, to bring it back to cooking a little bit, it's absolutely how I feel about trying to get people to cook more for themselves. Doesn't mean that you need to learn the most complicated recipe and go all in and only cook, 4-course dinners for yourself. It's starting small and doing little by little. And whether it's, not ordering takeout one night and just making some very simple, like buying some dried pasta, but making like a sauce that has some extra veggies in it that you cooked for yourself, that you put some time into, that you allowed your brain to wander while you chopped onions and carrots for 30 minutes. Like that's great. You got to start somewhere.
Yes. This is a perfect segue. Seriously. Because that's really, right, like what Cookshop essentially is all about, and like what this new awesome venture Cookwise, which we'll touch on, is all about. Cooking, it's right? Any action is about action. So like, and so many people, that is a huge thing, right? It's like everyone obviously has to eat to survive. A lot of people struggle with knowing what to eat, knowing how to get it, whether they should cook, or there's a lot of variables, a lot of things going on that trip people up. So yeah, so taking charge of not being on a diet, but what they eat, their diet, taking control of that, being proactive, cooking, that is direct action, deliberate action. So you are providing people an opportunity for that. So thank you. Thank you for your service. So tell me, obviously there was a lot of things, a lot of traveling, which was cool. Like you said, you worked in different places through this culinary journey, but you eventually landed in Portland.
Yep.
And because we don't have all the time in the world, we're going to fast forward through some things. So you work your way to Portland, and you eventually start this project called initially Portland Cookshop.
Cookshop. Cookshop.com is taken. It's a restaurant in New York that someone actually just called me the other day to make a reservation thinking I was that restaurant.
Oh.
But portlandcookshop.com is the website.
But you call it Cookshop.
Called Cookshop, which was a long time landing on that name, but story for another day. Basically worked in restaurants for a really long time and then taught at a culinary school. And there were so many elements of teaching that I really liked and a whole lot of elements that I didn't like. And so while I was doing that, I was sort of dreaming up what's my next step, what's the next endeavor going to be, and landed on a place where we can teach one-off classes to eager people that just want to learn how to make sourdough, how to make French macarons, how to make paella, whatever the dish is that we're teaching that night or that afternoon. And it's been a lot of fun, but trying to get people to, come to a space where they feel comfortable, where they're not intimidated by like fancy restaurant equipment was a big part of what I wanted the like look and feel of the space to be. At the beginning, I said, I want you to feel like you're in your sister's like nice kitchen. And the classes are meant to be, welcoming, not snobby in any way, meeting people where they are. We have a lot of classes that, the way the class is taught there's a certain way that we teach all of our classes, but we do kind of bend and sway a little bit to meet the students where they are. So if we have a group that comes in to learn pasta and every single person in there has made it several times, and sometimes we'll get half the room has been to Italy and taken a class, well, then we get to like introduce more complicated shapes and go more into the nerdiness of like sourcing flowers and things like that. Or we might have a day where like no one in the room has ever cooked anything other than mac and cheese and ramen, and the class kind of takes a little bit of a different shape. But having that flexibility to, be like a comforting place for students to learn about food, and where for if only 2 hours you are not staring at your phone and you're actually engaging with other people, that's something. Yeah.
So the whole engaging with other people part clearly is a big piece.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are very few classes that we teach where you are like head down working on one thing and you don't have to like get the input of the people around you. So most of our classes are kind of collaborative, and you're working on a project together, or you're at least like at a table with 4 people facing each other and talking about like the last great thing you ate or whatever.
Clearly the world right now is a little bit tumultuous. There's, some ups and downs, some things going on. Do you feel that community and connecting to other people and to shared interests and passions, do you think that's more important than ever? Do you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So for you personally, because you're a human being like us all who needs community and connection, I would imagine doing what you do, you get some of that from your business.
Yeah, and I think, like many professions, the like longer you do something and the more you kind of move up in the world, the less you do the thing that you originally did.
Yes, exactly.
You know what I mean? So I teach one of the classes that we teach at Cookshop, which is French macarons. Everything else is taught by a team of chef instructors. But so I'm at classes occasionally, but I'm not at them as much as I used to be. But most of my kind of energy and like community building comes from meeting people that are going to teach our classes, coming up with new classes that our chefs are going to teach, and like collaborating and working with the chefs, and also just people in the community that like our thing that we did last weekend was like, that's like coming up with those events really energizes me. And that's sort of the piece of it that really is still exciting and fun within the business.
Great. Yes. So because you just mentioned it, I'll reference back to this past weekend, Saturday. We did this very fun event together. So you had previously had, was it a once monthly sort of run?
It was a once a month
run club?
It was a run club, and it was basically I was starting a business, and I'm like, I'm going to run out of time for myself because I'm starting a business, because that's sort of this vision you have of entrepreneurs, like they work all the time, they never do anything. I'm like, well, if I carve out one Saturday morning a month to have a run club, at least I'll still get my the group runs that I love to go on and get outside. And if nothing else, I will do 3 miles every month with people at Cookshop. Yeah. And so, pre-pandemic, we did that once a month. And then it kind of fell by the wayside, partly because the business has just expanded a lot and we have a lot more classes. I also injured my knee, so the running part of it was not as top of mind as it was before. But So
the idea, which we are both excited about, is doing these events, right, that have multiple forms of movement possible. We like to run, but we don't want to be, or I at least, I'll speak for myself, don't always want to be run focused. So we had a walk group, we had a run group. People came back and did some yoga led by this great Linnea.
So good.
We had coffee from Good Coffee and some great little bites, actually, you and I both made. So it was amazing. I really enjoyed that event and felt, it was just so sort of simple and pure, not to sound cheesy, but it felt very good. I think I really enjoyed it because, like you said, right, our jobs, I feel like we both have had probably somewhat similar experiences of early in our jobs, we had a lot more direct people time. And as, again, not an uncommon story, as things have evolved, we have, more administrative duties, so to speak, and less direct people time. So going back to hosting something like this and being really in it as part of the community felt so good. So we're almost done for today. I
Okay.
know you might be happy about that, given you were a
This is
little
great.
nervous to be put in the hot seat. But last thing we'll touch on is this new venture you have, which is very
Yeah.
exciting, called Cookwise.
It's called Cookwise. We'll be launching soon-ish, and essentially there's kind of different pieces of it, but there's a class that we've been teaching at Cookshop for the past several years called Kitchen Essentials, and it's a 4-week, 3 hours, one night a week for 4 weeks, where you are learning all of the kind of basics of cooking. And we can only have 12 people in that class. We only offer it once a month. You have to be local in Portland to take this class. But there are so many elements of it that we see as being, you know, really sort of vital to becoming a good, confident cook. And then the other piece of it was me struggling to figure out what to feed my family. Trained, went to culinary school, have been working in food for years and years, but I suddenly have a picky family, and figuring out when you're really busy what to put on the dinner table every night just becomes this slog of like, you have to eat every night and you have to feed other people every day, and it's challenging.
Yeah.
And I tried ordering meal kits knowing that they weren't going to be very good, that there was going to be too much packaging, that the produce wasn't going to be ideal, that the proteins were going to be questionably sourced. But I tried it just to think like, okay, my girls are old enough, they could take cooking one of these meals each week. And of course the boxes arrive and it's like endless plastic and, this teeny tiny amount of whatever the ingredient is that I already have in my pantry. And yes, they could follow the instructions and make the fettuccine Alfredo with broccoli or whatever it was. But what it comes down to is the thing that I wanted from that meal kit was for someone to say, here's these 3 things for you to cook this week, and it's already planned and you already have the ingredients. And then flashing back, we have this tool, this class called Kitchen Essentials, and how do we take these 2 things, my problem with cooking dinner, by trying this meal kit thing that I didn't really feel good about, and create something that we can share with other people. And so Cookwise is basically a recipe subscription website where each week you're going to get 3 recipes. You're going to have an organized shopping list that you can just go and shop for all the things. You could even like plug them into your Instacart or wherever it is that you shop online. And then really good, simply written kind of, we call it chef shorthand. So it's not super wordy recipes. There's not like 17 paragraphs detailing, the backstory of why we wrote this recipe. There's no ads popping up. It's a very streamlined look and feel for the recipes themselves on the site, and kind of mixed in and tied in our video technique videos that show you how to do certain things within the recipes. We're going to be like, in a way it's very overt. In some ways it's kind of subversive, the way we're trying to get people to like learn some new things and learn our cooking philosophy that we teach in this like extensive class at the store. And so it's still evolving, and it hasn't launched quite yet, but it's soon. And I hope it becomes either an alternative for you ordering those meal kits, or just a bit of a solution to, what on earth am I going to cook again every night this week?
Awesome. That's super exciting.
Yeah.
Wow. So we will keep everyone informed about Cookwise and how it's developing and
coming
when
very
it's getting
soon.
ready to launch. Yes, that is so awesome. All right, we're basically out of time for today, but like I said, there's a lot more I wanted to talk to you about, so we're gonna have to bring you back.
Okay.
Very appreciative of having you here, and yeah, looking forward to more events with you and Cookshop and a lot of good community building and fun stuff ahead.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming out today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was not so bad.
Yes, yeah, I was about to say, you're like a natural. You put on the pro voice. Yes, okay. Cool. Well, thanks everyone. We will see you soon.